Oh, okay. Starting up as usual. Happy Friday, everyone. Let's see, where are we at? Under the pump again. Working about 2 hours. Hoping to get this workout done in about an hour. Gives me enough time to get ready for work. Everything weighted possible. I'll be wearing that weighted backpack. I'm gonna go up to 15 kilos. Last week I was about 10 kilos. We'll see how it goes. Doing the pull-ups. Still trying to figure out which legs. Russian twist as usual. It is Friday, and then the ancillary muscle or side muscle. I want to do. I do tibialis anterior, the front of your shin bone. Like these are the toes guy seems to do that quite a bit, and I've heard a few others. Well, just anecdotally, just others saying how it's helped a lot of people with their back pain. Not like I've got back pain. Well, it just depends how strenuous it is and whatnot. But you know, it's compared to my calves, probably my tibialis anterior is probably the least, if anything, ever been worked out. Just trying to figure out how do I I don't have this apparatus that that guy has where it's like a like he has a machine purely just to work tibialis anterior. So I guess I could just go up onto my heels, just like I'm doing here. Like it's not much, but I'm lucky because I'm just a beginner, so it doesn't need much to start off with. Like, I think I remember, yeah, it was standing on something on the ledge, toes out. So I guess you can use more of the muscle then, and then up onto your heels. Oh, trying my balance as well at the same time. I'm gonna look so weird doing it, but whatever. Anyway, gotta get started. Wasting time. As usual, listening to stuff in the background. Always happy to give advice. Please ask questions. I love answering questions. And even if I don't know the answer, I will find out what the answer is and get back ASAP.
We need to talk about right now, so buckle up, hit that like button, and the first thing we're jumping into is what happened last night, because going into it, there were huge expectations.
I think the red wave that's coming is going to be like the elevator doors opening up in The Shining.
It's not going to be an elevator. It's going to look more like Deep Impact, the tsunami at the end, but colored red.
I'm talking about 100 seats. I'm talking about winning South Texas, the Rio Grande Valley, taking D plus 10, D plus 12 districts.
Yikes. I don't know if they could have been more wrong, because while there are a number of things still developing, last night did not
I guess the only thing I'm
result in
scared
a
of
red
in adding
wave.
more
This thing was
weight
supposed
is.
to be vicious. Well, you likely know most of the results right now because it's hard not to pay attention. And
My
you're
door
well
frame
aware
can only
of
hold
beautiful
so
bastard
much.
fun. Today,
Really
I want to talk
testing
about not
its
only what we
engineering
saw,
and
but the specifics of it and maybe
integrity.
some of the whys. So where I'll start is with the key thing that you need to understand from the get-go, and that is what we saw from Republicans. It was one of the weakest performances in decades by the out-of-power party against a first-term president's party. In Pennsylvania, we saw John Fetterman beating out Trump-endorsed Dr. Oz without actually flipping a seat for the Democrats in the Senate. You also had Democratic Senators Maggie Hassan and Michael Bennet holding their hotly contested seats in New Hampshire and Colorado. Meanwhile, Republican candidates J.D. Vance and Ted Budd won their races for seats vacated by GOP members in Ohio and North Carolina. There was also a surprise absolute nail-biter in Wisconsin. The Republican Senator Ron Johnson was able to hold off Democrats. So right now, control of the Senate will come down to 3 states: Nevada, Arizona, and Georgia, all of which are currently held by Democrats. As of recording, Nevada Senator Catherine Cortez Master was trailing her Republican opponent with around 75% of the votes counted, while Arizona Senator Mark Kelly was leading his with just under 70% reporting. Then, in Georgia, because history always repeats itself, we're headed to a runoff. Because even though Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock is in the lead, both candidates were still below 50%.
So the goal is to get to half my body
weight
weight while doing this. I don't think the bag
so if
will
you're in
hold out.
Georgia, get ready to early vote
We'll
again
get to that
or vote on December
when that
6th,
comes
especially
up.
because control of the Senate could come down to Georgia, but it also might not because we don't know what's going to happen in Nevada and Arizona right now. Dems happen to win both there, they don't even need Georgia, though understandably they would still want it. Now, as far as the Senate, a lot of this kind of was expected in a certain range, but what was absolutely not expected is what went down in the House. Right, following the census, there's been crazy gerrymandering, especially on the Republican side. In some places like Florida, thanks to Ron DeSantis, the gerrymandering was absolutely ruthless. So you pair that with Biden's current approval ratings, inflation kind of going crazy, people going like, what the fuck's coming next? And there's this expectation that Republicans are going to take over so many fucking seats, even though they actually only need to net 5 to take over the House. Which I do want to mention, as of right now, they are projected to take it over, but by a much much smaller margin than initially projected, which I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, could also change like what they do in the House. With some believing that if it's a very, very small majority, they may be more moderate, whereas if there were way more Republicans, they might be kind of more Trumpian. And I don't mean as individuals, I mean like as a collective group. But as far as what we saw, yes, Republicans actually did flip a handful of key House seats. But they're seeing this in states like Virginia and very, very notably Florida and New York. The Democrats, for their part, also flipped a handful of seats and in essential battleground states like Ohio and Michigan. And that was in addition to a ton of Democrats holding on to incredibly contested seats that they had very good chances of losing. And even beyond that, with some Democrats having strong showings in some races they weren't even slotted to be close in, with easily one of the most notable being Colorado's 3rd district, which is currently held by insane Trumper Lauren Boebert. This race wasn't at all slated to be close, but with 90% of the votes counted as of recording, she's actually losing to the Democratic candidate. But her night started out like this and
I think
ended
that's
like
alright. If I
this.
can get up to 6
Praying to be
reps,
able to
that's not
pull this
bad.
thing out. And she's
I'm
by
more
no
trained
means
for
alone.
strength
There are
then.
a ton of House races that are on a razor's edge right
Oh.
now. It could go either way, and we're waiting for the votes to fully get counted. Also, beyond the national races, there were a ton of really important statewide contests in this year's midterms. I mean, there was a whopping 36 gubernatorial races taking place. And like the House, Republicans were expected to have solid ground here to take some of those spots. But according to 538, as of this morning, only 2 governorships have flipped, and both by Democrats. And the key significant thing here is that Republicans, but especially Trump-backed Republicans, didn't gain more traction. Right, while results in some key races are still trickling in, Democrats have officially beat prominent Trump-backed candidates in multiple battlegrounds where the election was challenged, including Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. With the election-denying Trumper in that last race, Doug Mastriano, getting especially whooped. That wasn't a beatdown, that was an ass-whooping, Doug. But on the other side, because there wasn't just one story here, we also saw plenty of Republican governors clocking very solid wins, including Kemp in Georgia, Abbott in Texas, and DeSantis in Florida. And a very key thing here, I don't know if anyone won yesterday more than DeSantis. Although it was already kind of leaning that way, Florida is no longer a toss-up state. It is a solid GOP state, with DeSantis calling this a win for the ages and saying we have redrawn the political map, which I would say actually very true, and not just in the way he gerrymandered Florida. On a statewide level, he has moved the needle, which is also part of the reason you have so many more people today saying, is he the future of the Republican Party? Right, there's already been so much talk of him being Trump without the baggage. And while DeSantis hasn't really spoke on any of that, it appears that it's definitely getting under Donald Trump's skin. The other day, Trump calling DeSantis sanctimonious. There have been reports that sources were saying Donald Trump has been livid about DeSantis. But also, I don't think Trump's really making a secret of it. There was a report yesterday where Trump said of DeSantis, if he runs, he runs. If he did run, I will tell you things about him that won't be very flattering. I know more about him than anybody other than perhaps his wife, who is really running his campaign. This could be in part due to Donald Trump worried that people were going to blame him for what happened. And actually, regarding if he should get credit or blame, before the results came in, he actually said this during an interview.
Tonight, win or lose, the results for Republicans, how much of that will be because of Donald Trump?
Well, I think if they win, I should get all the credit. And if they lose, I should not be blamed. But it'll probably be just the opposite.
So the question now is, with Trump getting increasingly and transparently aggressive towards DeSantis, does this make Republicans go, hey, oh, he really is more about person than party? Is he holding us back and DeSantis could actually take us further? Though I still stand by the idea that I would be shocked if DeSantis decided to take on Trump. Like, obviously, there are a number of his supporters that want him to run for president. Even as he was announcing victory, you had his supporters chanting 2 more years. Obvious acknowledgement that he is meant for bigger things. But I just can't imagine a world where those two run against each other and then, like, everything is still okay for the Republicans. But hey, like we often do with that conversation, we're getting far too ahead of ourselves. Also, jumping back out of Florida this year, there was a lot of focus on attorneys general and secretaries of state, because in the post-Roe, post-insurrection world, there are a lot of concerns. But some release a trailer.
Casey interview, ABC marker, saw sticks.
Why talk to me now when you're not getting creative control?
Also, a key thing here to refresh you on exactly who Casey Anthony is. Her story begins back in 2008 when she revealed to her mother that her 2-year-old daughter during orders. And then people are pissed off right now about Casey Anthony, and no, you did not just magically teleport to 2008. But rather, this new anger is around Peacock's new 3-part docuseries, Casey Anthony, Where the Truth Lies, that also just released a trailer.
Casey interview, ABC marker, saw sticks.
Why talk to me now when you're not getting creative control?
Also, a key thing here to refresh you on exactly who Casey Anthony is. Her story begins back in 2008 when she revealed to her mother that her 2-year-old daughter Kaylee had been missing for a month. The police then investigate. Suspicions quickly turn toward Casey as she repeatedly lies to the cops, with a lot of the evidence making her look super guilty. At this time, you have people saying she was strikingly calm and seemingly even happy during this period. And that's in addition to people saying, why did she wait so long to say anything about Kaylee's disappearance? We also see a nationwide campaign to search for this child kicking off, but eventually her remains are found in a wooded area close to the Anthony home with duct tape on her face. Casey then goes on trial for capital murder. She claims that her daughter accidentally drowned in the pool, and it becomes this absolute spectacle on the scale of the O.J. Simpson case. But in 2011, thanks largely to a remarkably talented legal defense, the jury acquits her and she goes free, shocking everyone. And so now, 11 years later, Casey's given her first on-camera interview since the trial, and Peacock's releasing it on November 29th, with the director Alexandra Dean saying since the acquittal, public opinion of Casey Anthony has largely been shaped by the media convinced of her guilt, and adding that the series will show what she called a startling psychological portrait of Casey and a complete narrative of what she says happened to her daughter weighed against multiple sources of potential evidence, and saying, I believe the result will surprise many and cause the American public to look at this story in a new light. With Dean also claiming that Casey had no editorial control, but if you look at the comments on this, people are up in arms. People saying things like, are we just going to give her another chance to tell us about how she's really the victim in all this? And no one wants to hear Casey continue to lie about what happened to Kaylee, as well as hope this isn't going to be the new trend. We shouldn't allow monsters to profit off their murders and networks to make money off of victims' gruesome killings. And so now you have thousands of people vowing to boycott the streaming service unless it pulls the plug on the series. But as far as if that'll actually happen, we'll have to wait to see. Oftentimes what we actually end up seeing with these controversies is that it backfires. It generates a conversation around the topic, there's a bigger spotlight on it, and it drives more eyes to the thing in question. And I'd love to know in those comments down below if you think that's going to be the case here, or really any thoughts you have on this story. And then the Nikita Dragon situation got way worse. So we talked about her yesterday. She reportedly was walking around her hotel naked, blaring loud music, and when approached by security and police, she allegedly threw a water bottle at them and slammed the door in their faces, leading to her arrest and charge of felony battery. Well, obviously that is a key part of this story. There's now a new angle to this because a video has now surfaced of a Zoom meeting allegedly between Nikita, who is trans, and a judge.
And Your Honor, may I ask one question? Do I have to stay here in the men's unit still? Yeah, I don't make the rules up there, but I have a accommodation for you. We just need a separate area.
Right, so Nikita seems to be asking the judge, do I actually have to stay in the men's unit, with the judge apparently saying that she doesn't make the rules, but going on to discuss the possibility of another accommodation. We've also begun to see things like photos of what appears to be Nikita's arrest report, labeling her as a male, with NBC reporter Kat Tenbarge also posting a photo of Nikita's affidavit this morning with it reading, the above listed individual appears as a female but would like to be recognized as a male, with Kat then citing the video and saying that the clip in this affidavit, at least on the surface, appear to directly contradict one another in how Nikita wants to be identified, which is why you had people who were even like, yeah, if she did what it says that she did, she should be held accountable, saying there's absolutely no excuse that she should be treated like this, saying the system is transphobic and it's unnecessarily putting her in extra danger. But also at the same time, you had people pushing back at that, with some trying to use Nikita's own tweets to try to justify her placement in the men's unit, or things like the day before her arrest she tweeted, bottom line, I see a man put hands on a woman, please call the cops, because need you forget, I know I look like a doll on the outside, but I still hit like a dude. Though also, it appears that a number of people on this side that were sharing stories around this have been misgendering her on purpose, saying things like, I think he'll be fine. But yeah, this is still developing, we'll have to wait to see, but in the meantime, I'd love to know any and all of your thoughts. And then, Mark Zuckerberg is killing his company because of his love of the metaverse, with Meta announcing today that it was laying off 13% of its workforce, which is around 11,000 people. While this news definitely sucks for those people, even if Facebook's offering a ton of services and benefits for a few months to try to make the transition easier, it's also in no way surprising. Right, in late October, there was an earnings call where the company made it clear that it's been a rough year and they expected a shitty Q4, with that scaring investors, leading to Meta stock crashing about 20%. And as far as Zuckerberg's version of things, he says this all happened because he gambled that e-commerce sales would continue like they did during the pandemic and because ad revenue was down, which I will say, I do not doubt that those things did not have an impact, but he didn't blame the metaverse. And right now, for anyone that has eyes and ears, that seems like the obvious answer. It has been an absolute money sink for Meta, costing them $9.4 billion in just 2022 alone. And understand, those losses are expected to grow significantly year over year. And this, in the face of Meta facing a massive uphill battle. Right, Zuckerberg's version of the metaverse has been widely mocked by the people most likely to be early adopters, with people saying even after a graphics update, it looks worse than VR chat and is reportedly a worse experience despite having more features, which if you've ever experienced VR chat, you know is saying something because it's a complete shit show. But still, you had Zuckerberg also announcing that the company would be hyper-focusing on the metaverse and other long-term projects. And so right now, one of the main questions is, where is the bottom for Meta? Because all of this is happening for a company whose stock lost like 70% of its value this year. And I mean, depending on what happens, Zuckerberg is either going to look like a genius or like the biggest fucking clown in the world, which I will say is really saying something because there are a number of billionaires right now vying for that position. And then also, I guess since we're talking about that grand prize, we should talk about Elon Musk in the news today. Twitter today changed, then unchanged, then changed again. Right, I woke up this morning, I checked Twitter, and I had 2 check marks, just double checked up on a Wednesday morning. I had that regular check mark, but then also I had an official check mark, which appeared to be a special check mark they were giving to public figures as well as politicians. With easily the funniest thing about this being that John Green had a special check mark, but Hank Green didn't. I imagine because despite Hank Green being a very successful and good author, he didn't write a book about kids with cancer that made us all cry. Side note, if you haven't already read An Absolutely Remarkable Thing and A Beautifully Foolish Endeavor, highly recommend it. Fantastic books despite Hank being a non-checkmark normie. But yeah, main thing, on Twitter this morning there was a lot of what the fuck is this, a lot of mockery. Like, it just looks stupid. It made it so incredibly obvious this checkmark thing is just a bullshit way for him to try and drum up some money. It was unnecessarily taking up space. It all just looked ugly. And then in like an hour, it all disappeared. Elon Musk replying to MKPHD and confirming that he just killed it, which is so ridiculous. It's amazing that it's really happening. Elon is legitimately running Twitter like he's a 2002 forum mod who's still figuring out settings. And this very much appears to be what we should come to expect. With Elon going on to tweet, Twitter will do lots of dumb things in coming months. We will keep what works and change what doesn't. But yeah, for now, we'll have to wait to see what happens with Elon Musk's hands on the wheel of this clown car. And then the situation in Australia is absolutely evil. So last month, a group of hackers infiltrated the Australian private health insurance company Medibank, with them threatening to release sensitive health information, including from notable people like politicians, actors, and activists unless they paid a ransom, to which the company reportedly called their bluff, not believing they actually had sensitive data, and holy shit were they wrong. Because the hackers began dumping health records for 10 million Australians onto the dark web. We're talking about 40% of the entire country. Even going pure fucking evil and organizing the data in what they deemed naughty and nice lists. The naughty list, including people suffering from stuff like drug addiction, eating disorders, and HIV, as well as releasing other information like customers' names, birth dates, addresses, and passport numbers, all of which can be used to extort innocent people. And unfortunately, this is probably just the beginning. It's believed the hackers will continue posting records, and they claim that they'll leak keys for decrypting credit cards next, though Medibank denies that they have access to that. Right now, this is still a developing situation, right? We're already learning which lawmakers were caught up in the hack, with one of the biggest being Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. And as far as who is responsible for this, we don't know for sure, but the dark web domain where they leaked everything used to be run by the Russian ransomware gang. Well, of course, everyone's outraged at these hackers. Many are also pointing their finger at Medibank for being too slow to respond. Plus, despite being an insurance company, it doesn't have cyber insurance, so it's expected to lose tens of millions of dollars, and that's before the lawsuits that are already being prepared against them. And notably, all of this comes just weeks after Australia confirmed legislation that would increase the maximum penalties for serious or repeated privacy breaches. So now, yeah, the country's federal police investigating, but I mean, once again, this is likely going to get worse over the following weeks. Absolute insanity. But that brings us to the end of today's show. Thank you for watching, liking, and subscribing to what's now the Sunday to Thursday Philip DeFranco shows. I'm a glutton for punishment. Maybe we'll even make it to 7 days. But as always, my name's Philip DeFranco. You've just been filled in. I love yo faces, and I'll see you tomorrow.
It is without a doubt harder to be a man than a woman. And in this video, I'm going to show you exactly why. You know what's funny? I will be labelled an incel, and I've been labelled an incel and a misogynist just because I talk about men's issues. But why wouldn't I? Men have issues just like women, and we need to address these problems. Otherwise, we see things like the rate of suicide only increasing for men. But we don't want to do anything about it because we're worried what people say about us. I won't cop that. I will continue to speak out. Just for raising the possibility that men have it tough in life, you are automatically a bigot. That's madness. Saying that, who cares? What, I'm not supposed to speak the truth because I'm worried what people will think about me? Never. The woman in question saw a Reddit post from a transgender individual who became a man and couldn't believe what it was like. And we're going to have a seat and watch that reaction. Shout out to Abba and Preach, who I saw this video on their channel. Very good channel. Go and check them out. But before we do, this video is brought to you by the great people at Established Titles. Ladies and gentlemen, is fun, it's great, people love this the channel, and support them. All right, lords, ladies, let's sit down. On with the video.
So there's this viral tweet going around from a Tumblr account from a person named Zan, who is a trans man, detailing the culture shock he's experienced post-transition.
Okay, so it took a woman to speak out about what men are going through to finally make people give a shit. That's hilarious.
So I'm just gonna straight up read most of Zan's post to you because I thought it was incredibly perceptive, and I want to amplify it, but I don't want to risk messing up his words or his message.
So respectful.
So here we go. I'm pretty quiet about the fact that I'm a.
Hang on a second. You want to be respectable, yet you throw a mustache on? I don't know. I think that's a little bit naughty. I don't think you should do that. I think someone's going to get offended. Not all men, not all trans men have facial hair. And it is, in fact, very triggering for you to even state that. Absolutely disgraceful. It's like me sitting here pretending to be a trans woman and pulling my shorts up that I'm wearing to reveal a camel toe. I'll do it. I'll do it.
He's a comedian, in
Quiet
case
about the
anyone's
fact that I'm a
wondering.
trans man, but holy shit, I need to tell you about the culture shock I'm going through because it's blindsiding me.
I imagine becoming a man and then being around other men would be very, very different. We just do things different. Particularly when we're around each other, men do weird shit. The things that we get up to, you would not believe, ladies. Like, let me tell this story to you. I have a friend, and I think everyone has a very similar friend like this. A bit of a loose dude, can't really hold down a relationship. This guy, we'd play footy on the weekend, and then we'd go back to the pub for a couple of beers. It'd be a big game, we'd be all battered and bruised and blood and all that shit. All that man shit. And we'd get back to the pub. We'd get blind drunk. We wouldn't even eat. We didn't give a fuck, right? No water, no hydration. You know what he'd do to impress all the boys? He would get a piece of wood. He would get a nail and a hammer. He would then reveal his ball sack and put a nail through his ball sack into the wood with the hammer. It's a true story, and as little Dixon gives me my morning coffee, thank you, dear. That's a true story, isn't it? Unfortunately, she says. Thank you, dear. It goes further than that. When I was at school, do you know how all the boys in the morning would greet each other? We'd walk up to each other and sack whack
Yep.
one another. Whack them on the sack. Hit them
Still
in
happens.
the most painful area on a man. Drops a man. Like you don't have any control over it. It drops you. They walk up to each other and just sack whack each other. There was this weird month at school when I was at school where prodding was a thing. If someone bent over to tie their shoe or whatever, you'd walk up behind them and fucking try and fist their asshole. It was like, that's a true story too.
1,000 years of pain.
Weird times. I did go to a private boys' school. The people doing the prodding were the teachers. Weird. That's not true, but it probably could be true. And the fact that that's funny is because it's true. Don't go to a private school. You're going to get fucked. Point being, if you become a man, it's a culture shock.
There's this huge sense of social isolation that comes with being perceived as male because now people are subconsciously treating me as a potential predator.
Okay, fair point. Like if you were a woman on Monday, right, and you walked behind another lady on the street, maybe it was like around 6 o'clock at night, a little bit dark, she wouldn't really care. But if you came back on Tuesday and you were then a man, you had transitioned, she would be terrified. And that sucks. And I hate the fact that women have to feel like that. I mean, I feel like that too, if some weird dude's walking behind me. Like, I just do. Particularly if they're bigger than you or they look a bit weird. You know, they might have a knife or a gun or whatever. These are the situations that have to go through your head because that's how you remain safe. It's unfortunate,
2 more sets.
but it's how you remain safe.
And
I
it's
know
a
a lot
Russian
of people
twist
say, hey, we need a
answer is
safer
$3.
world, and we do. But what do? You
First time
can't
doing
just
that
wish
one.
it. It doesn't just appear, right? This is how society and the world has been for all time. Like, men are dangerous creatures. It's not good. And it's not, I don't like it, but it's just, it is the way it is. In saying all that, I don't think it's fair that the media treat it like all men are dangerous, all men are potential rapists. That's not fair. I also think it's shit that the media say that women shouldn't have to look after themselves. Okay, you shouldn't have to in a perfect world, but that's not where we live. I also absolutely despise, and this is happening all over Australia at the moment, that men will get blamed for rape, men will get blamed for murder, men will get blamed for sexual assault, rather than the actual perpetrators. Have a look at this.
Instead of telling our girls not to walk through parks, maybe we should be telling our boys not to rape them.
In doing so, by blaming all of men for the evils in the world, men become enemy number one. Men become the fear of women, the number one fear of ladies all over the globe, and that's not a good thing. And also translates not just to men, but to young boys. We have young boys who go to primary school or they're 6 or 7 years old, and their classmates who are female see them as future predators. That's atrocious.
Looking at me like, wait,
all
something's
strangers,
missing.
no matter their gender, keep their guard up around me. It made me realize that there is no inherent camaraderie in male socialization, like there is in female socialization.
Yeah, I guess the ladies out there, it's all the yachts queens immediately. Whenever you see another girl, it's yachts queens and fucking nails and shit. But for men, like, we don't like other strangers who are men. We just don't, because they've always been a threat throughout thousands of years of human evolution. You see another male who is a stranger, he's probably going to kill you, and that's built into us. It's much like the animal kingdom. They don't trust other males. There's something about testosterone flowing through your blood that just makes people inherently the possibility of violence is always there.
Unless, of course, it's in very specific environments. And the fact that I don't ambiently experience this mutual kinship in basic exchanges anymore is an insanely lonely feeling.
Loneliness is the biggest issue facing men across the globe. That and the fact that masculinity is vilified for everything, blamed for everything. Those two things destroy men. I mean, we often talk about how, you know, it's so beautiful being, women are beautiful and femininity is wonderful, but yet everything that's male is demonized. And I don't think that is a healthy thing. I don't think that fixes anything, and I think it creates more problems than it even potentially patches up. I think that's why we gravitate to sport, or we gravitate to groups that like the same thing. That's how we find friends as adult men or even as children. This is all something that women very rarely experience. Like actual loneliness, like maybe if you're a really ugly chick with a big fucking growth on your fucking forehead, I don't know. But it's unlikely that you'll see true loneliness ever in your life. Why? Because men still want to be around you. Like they are desperate to be around you. Men don't care. Any hole's a goal, that's real. Sure, you might feel sad and a little bit lonely every now and then, but there's someone out there who would take you on in an instant. Men don't have that. I guess it's female privilege. For men, loneliness is the biggest killer out there, I feel. And without that connection to other men or masculinity or things that blokes do, that's why they break. That's why they crumble, and that's why they kill themselves. Their minds disintegrate into what only can be described as rubble of their former selves, and suicide often follows.
You know how bad this would have fucked up my mind if I had grown up like this? It is 4:30 a.m. and I'm mourning the loss of a privilege I didn't know I had. Frankly, this is something I would have never understood without living the experience. It is now blatantly clear to me that most cis men probably experience chronic emotional malnutrition.
Chronic emotional malnutrition. Now, this is an issue where the blame is always shifted in a certain direction, and I think it's really interesting. Whenever we talk about men's issues, violence or addiction or loneliness, whatever, we always end up blaming masculinity, men, things that dudes do. We blame men for men's problems. With women's problems, it's funny. We also blame men. So you wonder why men feel so alone in this world, where everything's going against them, and everyone's telling them how bad they are and how violent they are, and they're perpetrators, and yet we're supposed to
not that
fix
many reps.
ourselves? What? To take something from your world, you're victim blaming. That's what you're doing. Is it helpful to say to someone when they're depressed, hey, it's your fault? No. No, it's not. What's more, it's even harder when it's about something you can't change, like your gender. Yeah, you heard me.
This deprivation comes from all sides of the aisle, by the way. In the case of women, when I'm out in public and interact with them, all of them come off as incredibly aloof, cold, and mirthless.
Now, I understand this, because a lot of dudes are very creepy. And, like, I could sit here and go, not all dudes are creepy. A lot of dudes are pretty creepy. I'm sure I've been a creep in the past, and if I crapped on you, I'm sorry. That's a young dude or a young version of me doing dumb shit. And I think that's a part of men that they just need to learn.
I can relate to that.
If they don't pull their heads in and they get to 30 and they're still being a mad creep, then okay, yeah, sure, they're fucking idiots. But young dudes creeping,
definitely not the best moral compass.
Chatting up girls and all that type of stuff. But I think in the same respect, like girls do that to men, but they just always get the guy. Guys just need to sort of cast their net wider. It's like commercial fishing. Like it's damaging, but you have to do it.
Trust me when I say that women aren't just being needlessly guarded. But I only have complete understanding of this context because I've experienced female socialization. If I hadn't, I would have thought this coldness was a conspiracy against me devised by roughly half the human population.
Yeah, I guess you can sort of think that there is a conspiracy out against you as a man because like all you hear in the papers and the news and the articles online and all that type of shit, YouTube videos, TikToks, that men are the bad people in the world, men are the enemy, we need to stop men. Yeah, I can't imagine why we think there's a conspiracy.
And as for male socialization, again, it seems taboo for a man to be platonically intimate with men for reasons I have yet to fully understand. But I think it boils down to A, the fact that society teaches boys that it's not okay to be soft with each other, and B, garden variety homophobia.
I hug my mates, and you should hug your mates too. I love that shit. Like, don't go around sucking your mate's dick, unless you want to, but maybe I didn't do that when I was younger.
That's next level
but
bro
as I've
shit.
gotten older, and I see my mates less, you know, that's just what happens as you get older, I always hug them, and I love them, and I really do love them and care for them. I don't suck their dicks. Not yet.
But men are not machines of war. Yeah, testosterone absolutely gives you dumb bastard brain.
Ooh, dumb bastard brain.
Bastard brain.
Does it? What about if you're a trans person taking testosterone? Does that give you dumb bastard brain? Like, it's a joke, I get it, and that's fine, you can make that joke. But the problem with making that joke is if I made the same joke about women with estrogen, then you'd fucking have the shit to me. If I said ladies on their period with all the hormones carrying on are fucking nutbags, insane people and should be locked up, you'd be mad. And that's the problem with this thing. You can't have it both ways, mate. All I want is equality.
The human species looks so much colder standing from this side. I can see how men might convince themselves that their feelings of emotional desperation is personal weakness, as opposed to a symptom they're experiencing from white imperialism.
You were doing so well. You can't blame this on white. Oh, for fuck. Being a woman is hard. I'm not disputing that. My wife is pregnant at the moment, and seeing what she is going through is absolutely just, like, it's ridiculous. I cannot believe that that's what women have to go through. That's madness. And the fact that women have been doing that for millennia, fucking Jesus Christ, ladies. And I also think about when she was young.
That's it.
Oh, weird, I also think about when she was young and the pressures put on her by society. I don't think that's fair. I push the question, where do those pressures come from? Do they come from the models themselves? You see on Instagram right now, they blame men for the beauty standards, but it's the Instagram models that are posting the pics. Come on. If you don't want to do that, you don't have to. There's no doubt, and let's admit it, that there is male privilege, but there's also female privilege as well. Most of the billionaires in the world are men, and that is a privilege, but it's a very small amount. There's not many of them. And really, if you look at men as a whole, to quote Henry David Thoreau, the mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation. And that is the truth. And that is why men kill themselves 5 times more than women. They're sad. And that's fucked up. Ladies and gentlemen, let me know what you think in the comment section below.
Some people have too much time on their hands.
G'day, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Isaac Butterfield, and this is a serious video. I am pissed off. I am filthy. Like, I am very, very angry about everything in this video. And I think once you watch it, you will be too. Because in this video, we're talking about something that affects so many people. We're talking about cancer. And we're talking about someone who treats cancer being treated like a common criminal. And I think this is disgusting. I think it needs to be absolutely reverted immediately. And I guarantee you that after you see this, you'll think the same. But first, we do have a sponsor, Established Titles, ladies and gentlemen. If you didn't know, people have been...
I was thinking about buying this for one of my mates.
Isaac Butterfield. And I tell you why. Amazing charity.
It's a very gimmicky gift.
Quote unquote, TIA. Now, this brain cancer. Children based here in Australia, 2 news programs, quote unquote, have been going after a man who saves children from brain cancer, children and adults. This is about Charlie Tia. Now, this man you may have heard of, or maybe if you're not from Australia, maybe you haven't heard of. But what he does is he does the riskiest surgeries. The surgeries when you are told that your child is going to die, he is the one that tries to save their life. You should know this man's name. He is a fucking hero. Critics have branded the ACA, a current affair interview, a hack job and a witch hunt, claiming it unfairly painted Dr. Tio as an immoral, money-hungry physician whose successes are overshadowed by his failures. Tio has been accused of selling false hope, charging exorbitant amounts of money for ultimately futile operations, and exploiting desperate patients. I can absolutely call bullshit on all of that. For most of us, cancer has affected someone in our families, or at least someone that we know quite well.
It's obviously a debilitating and horrible illness, and it really does affect people, not just the people that it directly affects, but it indirectly affects people for the rest of their lives. It is a fucking horrible disease. And I think of all the cancers, brain cancer must be the most feared. I personally know, I think 2 people who have passed away from brain cancer, and about 3 others who currently have a form of brain cancer. One of Dr. Tio's patients was just on my podcast, Matt Williams, OAM. He has a brain tumour that is sort of dormant in his brain. But if they go to operate on it, it could fix him, it could give him a long life, or he could die immediately. These are the options given to patients by Charlie Tio. Now with Matt's tumour, the doctors have told him that it will kill him one day. It could be in 8 days or 80 years. That is the position that he's in, and that's why he's gone that extra step to try and save his own life. Brain cancer seems to affect people seemingly out of nowhere, and the stories that we hear about the most are unfortunately with children. We often hear about young kids, and we say to ourselves, how can that happen? This little baby's just come into the world, and now they're dying. It's heartbreaking. And for the longest time, being diagnosed with a particular type of brain tumour is a death sentence for a child. Along comes Charlie Tio, who saves some children's lives. Other children pass away. They die because the tumour itself is so diffused, this is what they call it in the medical field, diffused into the brain that they can't remove it without either occasioning death or causing something horrible to happen, or they just pass away because it's just inoperable. But Charlie Tio gives them a fucking chance. He gives them a chance. He takes on the surgeries that no one else will. But recently some patients have come out on 60 Minutes here in Australia and claimed that Charlie Tio not only botched surgeries, but he maimed their children, or maimed the adults. And also that he's not an ethical man. This story was headed up by 60 Minutes
one plate,
and an
10 kilos
investigation
steel.
alongside the
Gonna try to do it with the Russian
Herald.
twists.
This was a hit piece. Many people jumped to Charlie Tio's defence, thankfully. And the next night on a current
still 10
affair,
kilos in the bag.
he was given the right of reply. But the
28
interview
kilos on the
itself was a
kettlebell.
hack job. It was awful, it was terrible,
about
it was
30.
shit journalism, and they didn't even
38.
air the full interview. If you wanted to watch the full interview, you had to go to their fucking website, which no one's gonna do. And Channel 9 didn't give a fuck about this. All they were doing was double dipping on ad money. That's all they were doing. And just know this, Charlie Tio right now has been banned from doing surgeries, at least for the last year and a half he has. But you should also know, he was removing up to 10 a week. Up to 10 people could have potentially had their life changed, and now those people dead. Dead. Dr. Tio is unable to perform high-risk procedures unless he has written approval from a second independent neurosurgeon with more than 20 years of specialist experience. Dr. Tio says he believes the restrictions are a result of a broken medical system. Quote, "It's a dysfunctional system whereby a competitor can make a vivacious," great word, Charlie, "complaint about you. You're immediately presumed to be guilty," he said. "And then you've got to prove your innocence to the very person who complained about you. How can that system work? So someone complains about you that doesn't like you anyway, and then you've got to prove to them that you're fucking innocent. Doesn't sound very fair. All right, let's have a look at the shit job that a current affair did.
Hello, I'm Tracy Grimshaw. Welcome to a current affair.
Normally if I just did the kettlebell, I get to about 40 reps
Who
per
the fuck
set.
wrote that? You should be
But
shot
with
into
this-
space.
Australia's most famous neurosurgeon
I've only
is
got to do
also
20.
the most polarising. If you watched 60 Minutes on Sunday, you might think he's a dangerous maverick who has no place in an operating theatre.
And wow, aren't you really helping with that belief pattern of your listeners? Setting this whole thing
Does that
up
not look like
that
much?
allows every single
You're
one
working
of
your
your
anterior
viewers
calf
and listeners
muscles?
without brain
Anterior
cells
calf.
to not have any of their
anterior
opinions
shins?
challenged. To not get to the bottom of
Tibialis
anything.
anterior.
They just sit at home going, yes, well said,
Feels like just trying to bring your
Tracy."
toes
That's the host, the big
towards your
fucking-
face.
Yeah, well said, Tracy.
So
You
rather than
fucking
working your
get it.
calves
They
when you're pointing
genuinely believe
downwards,
that this man is a bad
you go the
person.
other way.
That is disingenuous and bad.
I forgot how many
fake
reps I'm up to now.
journalism. Now, the story on 60 Minutes that the current affair is talking about focused on 3 individual stories. Story number 1 was Michelle, who claimed that Dr. Tio operated on the wrong side of her brain and failed
I'll figure out a
to tumour
resistance
that
exercise for
caused
this.
her
her epilepsy.
Another
Now,
time,
that's a pretty
but
big claim, and neurosurgeon
my first time doing
operating
this,
on the wrong side, that's bad enough
I
to
won't
ruin a
need much
career.
resistance.
But
It's my first time.
here's Charlie's response.
The tumour was in an area where the best approach was from the other side. We use frameless stereotactic guidance, which is a computerised guidance system, and that allows you to localise the tumour very well. Yes, I did leave tumour behind. I left tumour behind because when I got in there, the definition between normal and abnormal was very poorly defined. So I thought I did the right thing.
I get why you have angry patients, but he just explained it. He did it by the book. It makes complete sense, and that should have been on 60 Minutes in the first fucking place. The second story surrounded a young boy from India. He was diagnosed with an inoperable diffuse, meaning it was mixed with brain matter so far so that it couldn't be removed without damaging the brain. 2 Indian doctors said it was inoperable, and Dr. Charlie Teo disagreed. And he also believes that there's more than just 2 types of tumours, the diffuse, and I forget the other name because I'm not a fucking neurosurgeon. He believes there's one that is a combination of one, that he could go in and remove the bit that can be removed, but stop at the bit that is diffused and can't be removed. Teo goes on to explain, and this was horrifying to hear, that doctors, neurosurgeons, are often
120
wrong
beats.
about what can be removed and what can't be removed.
A lot of focal, operable, curable brainstem tumours are lumped into that category of diffuse inoperable. How often does that happen? If you look at the literature, 10% in one article, 40% in another article.
Between 10 and 40% of the time. So between 10 and 40% of patients died with the possibility of being saved, allegedly. Teo goes on to explain this in detail, and here's what A Current Affair does with that part of the interview.
If you look at the literature now,
since I'm not doing any more pull-ups,
it actually says, well, we got it wrong.
His father...
A hard cut, an edit. Why would you do that? This interview goes for 23 minutes. Why would you stop it there, you unprofessional fucks? Teo goes ahead with that surgery we were just talking about, and unfortunately it ends badly, very badly in fact, but this is cutting-edge neurosurgery. This is super risky on top of being risky because this child is being told that they will die. Not they may die, that they will die.
With Michelage, I didn't get it right. And that is, unfortunately, the nature of brainstem surgery. It only takes 1 millimetre too far and you can damage someone irreparably.
I mean, Michelage spent the last 8 to 10 months of his life. He couldn't walk, he couldn't talk, he couldn't eat. He was staring at the ceiling and he communicated by blinking his eyes.
Yeah.
Teo believed that tumour was both diffused and focal, meaning it can be removed but not all of it. But the whole thing is you have to stop where the focal tumour ends.
I don't have a heavier kettlebell.
Will damage the brain.
So I'm going to improvise. I'm putting 10 kilos in this backpack.
But these things happen in surgery. We're talking about millimetres of room. Not even millimetres, maybe 1 millimetre too far. And the person is, their whole body is destroyed. But then Grimshaw, the host, says this.
Is that worth giving it a shot? Is that better than death?
Is that better than death? No. Being a vegetable, laying there, not being able to move, and the only way this young boy could communicate was blinking.
Do you want a chance to live or do you want to die? That's the question.
But that's hindsight. Dr. Charlie Teo gave this young boy a chance, when no one else would, a chance that he could go on and do the most important thing in life. Live. That's what the chance he got. Unfortunately, it didn't go that way, but he had the opportunity. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. This is the power of hindsight, right? Oh, you shouldn't have done that, you shouldn't have done that. Well, fuck. Rock in a hard place, isn't it? The third patient, Bella, is a little girl and the family has a terrible diagnosis, and Dr. Charlie Teo gives them a 1% chance that potentially
maybe a few more
pull-ups
at the end.
Yes, if you showed it to 99 out of 100 neurosurgeons in the world, they would call it a DIPG. My feeling was that it wasn't. It was focal, and it was worth giving it a shot.
Worth giving it a shot. This is what this guy does. That's why people go to him, because he will give it a shot. Even if you can extend the life by a matter of days. Like, that's worth it, right? For your family member, for your baby. Tracy goes on to ask, is he sorry that he operated? Insinuating, I guess, is he sorry that she died? Well, of course he is. Of course he fucking is. But think about how many people would have died if he didn't intervene. You got to weigh these things up. This isn't an evil man. This isn't a Nazi doctor. This is a dude trying to save children and adult lives from a fucking insidious disease like brain cancer. He's not going in there harming
sorry that
people
you weren't able to
deliberately.
save the patient.
Why is this even an argument?
And
I worry for
someone's
his
trying to
mental state.
portray
He
me
feels
as
sorry for
some
every
money-hungry
single one of those
bastard
patients.
who is
Maybe it's to a
operating and
degree,
hurting
fair
children
enough, he is human.
based on money. That's what I want to correct. It's not that case.
I don't think anyone other than his detractors and these media people think that he's a bad person. I think anyone in the regular community, I mean, let me know in the comment section,
they think he's a fucking hero.
I keep pictures of my patients on my phone to remind me every day of how I've got to do it better, how I've got to find a cure for cancer. So when someone says to me or accuses me of disregard for life, disregard for quality of life, treating my patients as if there's some sort of bank where I can get money out of them, that I find abhorrent and disgusting.
Does that sound like a person who wants to hurt?
It's an insult.
No.
Okay, I've heard everything you've just said, except the Bella Howards and the Mikolaj Barmans of this world are not lab rats. They're not an experiment. They're lives. They're not a learning exercise or a training exercise.
They're dying, Tracy. They're dying. Are you fucking deaf? Unless someone does something right now, they will be dead by the end of the year. Maybe even sooner. That's the reality of this situation. There is one man standing in between them and the Grim Reaper, giving them an option, giving them a chance. It's not a very good chance, but it's a chance. And I think when you're faced with certain death, a lot of people would take that chance.
But you don't work in the public system, and your patients very often have to crowdfund to pay for surgery that costs $80 or $100 or $150,000. It's a lot of money. If you're not in it for the money, why not be in the public system?
He doesn't work for free. Is that a surprise? Dr. Charlie Teo doesn't work for free. Who would have thought he wouldn't work for free? He goes on to say that he doesn't work in the public hospital sector in Australia because he can't choose his own team, his own nurses, his own anaesthetists. He can't choose them. So he'd rather work in the private sector where he can have the best of the best. This is like going into war. They're going to war against this brain tumour, right? They need the best soldiers in there. It's like you don't send a regular fucking outfit of fucking shitty soldiers. You send in the SAS. And the SAS costs money. This isn't a problem caused by Charlie Teo. It's a problem caused by the public hospital sector.
If I was a patient, I'd want my surgeon to be relaxed.
Fucking look at this. Look at this ad that pops up about the next part of the story. Show me the money. Like he's saying, oh, I'm not going to help your kid, and your dying kid, unless you pay me. Pay up. You have a man pleading for his personal and professional life, and that's the shit you pop up in between his fucking video. Yeah, fucking fucks. Everything costs money. I saw this on a TikTok recently, right? These American people were talking about how much having a baby in America costs without insurance. It is like $150,000. So wouldn't you pay $150,000, crowdfund it, find it, if it's going to save someone's life? Yes, of course you would. Of course you would. It costs money to be in hospitals. It's ridiculous how much it costs, but that's what it costs apparently. Ladies and gentlemen, all I can say is we are lucky to have Dr. Charlie Teo here in Australia, and the sooner he is back operating, the better for a lot of people. Without him and people like him, hundreds of people would have lost their lives a lot earlier or would have just lost them. Instead, they are alive, living their best life. To break the mold, we have to do sometimes risky things. And unfortunately, sometimes those risky things have unfortunate consequences. But let's learn from them. Let's see if there's more people who can be as good as him. Not attack him, not destroy him, not remove him. That's fucking stupid. Ladies and gentlemen, let me know what you think in the comment section. See you later.
Single meal for 11 weeks. And keep in mind that 11 weeks in a rodent's lifespan is a really long time. That's about an eighth of their total lifespan. So is it that there's no effect, or is it that the effect is relatively small and would take a really long time and very high level of control to see in humans? I don't know, but I think what I would say relatively confidently is if you're going to do like a 16-8 intermittent fasting, you're probably fine. Especially, and again, what is the goal, right? Like if you're a bodybuilder looking to be the most massive person you possibly can, or you're a football player, or you're in some field that having as much lean body mass as possible is really important for you, then I would say, well, you're not really gaining a whole lot by doing some form of time-restricted eating.
I think most of the people listening to this do not fall into that category.
Right.
I think most people want to maintain or lose weight. They'd like to perhaps add a bit of quote-unquote shape or muscle to specific areas of their body and lose body fat.
Right, and I think your normal forms of time-restricted eating are probably perfectly fine for that, right? And again, I don't want somebody to think, well, I do, alternate day fasting, there's no point to me resistance training because I'm going to lose muscle mass. No. You can still build muscle doing that. You just might not build as much muscle as you would if you were eating in a more traditional format. But if that's something that works for you and your goals, and especially if it's fat loss or controlling your calories, then again, it's about the hierarchy of what's important, right? So to answer your question, I do think that timing and frequency matters a little, not so much frequency, but distribution more so. So I think the distribution matters, but it's a much smaller lever than just getting enough total protein in. And then as far as like animal versus plant, I used to be in the camp of there's no way somebody can build as much muscle on a plant-based diet. And now I think I've come back to you can, it just requires a little bit more planning. And I don't want to say always, but it's very difficult to do without an isolated source of protein. So unless you're going to supplement with an isolated plant source of protein, it's very difficult to get enough without going over on total calories, because you can figure that, especially like take somebody who may be calorically restricted, trying to get enough protein from whole intact plant sources. So you've got a few different things working against you. One, the sources of protein you're consuming also have carbohydrate and or fat. Two, it's a less bioavailable form of protein. And three, it's a lower quality of protein in terms of it has typically less leucine, less branched amino acids, and less essential amino acids.
You answered the question that I almost interrupted you to ask, which was, does it boil down to the leucine content? And it sounds like that is one of the components, and that a lot of the vegan and vegetarian sources of excellent protein, that excellent protein, vegetarian or vegan source is co-packaged with calories from carbohydrates and or fat that make it hard to stay under the caloric threshold. Whereas a steak is, I'm not, and obviously people might want to avoid that for ethical reasons.
Sure.
But that's a different matter entirely. But a steak or a piece of chicken or an egg is, well, an egg, has a yolk, which is, there's fat there, but is almost a pure protein fat source. There's no carbohydrate along for the ride.
Right. So I think what I would say is that, you can do it. It takes a little more planning. And
he's not allowed in the room.
Always, if you're a vegan, especially, you're going to be better off like supplementing with some isolated form of protein, or vegan form of protein. Now, this is where it gets into, people say, well, what about the limiting amino acids and those sorts of things? It's a consideration. Some of the better forms of vegan protein in terms of amino acid content are like soy. Now, I hear everybody screaming online about their testosterone levels. In terms of actual outcomes and looking at testosterone, there was a recent meta-analysis looking at soy, and I think if it's your only source of protein, then maybe the dosage is high enough to cause some weird effects. But if you're just using it like once or twice a day, it doesn't seem to have an effect on testosterone or estrogen. So that can be a decent source of protein because it is a complete protein source. It does have a PDCAAS of 1, which PDCAAS is basically a measure of protein quality based on, does it provide enough of all the amino acids so that none are limiting. And so soy is one of the only vegan sources that does that. Interestingly, potato protein isolate actually has a similar essential amino acid content to whey. So isolated potato protein, it's just really hard to find. I've been trying to source it.
But vegans take note, vegetarians take note, because, or vegans rather, because whey is vegetarian, and whey is a very high quality protein source.
Very high quality protein source. And actually, they're actually creating whey now out of, I think it's, I may mischaracterize this, but I believe they're able to produce it out of like yeast or something like that.
Amazing.
That, so for vegans, now this is a great option because you can have whey that's not animal based that is going to be every bit as good as an animal based whey. So I think that's great. Getting to the leucine, let me go back, sorry. So another reason that using an isolated protein can be helpful is because it's more bioavailable as well when it's been isolated out. When it's the protein bound up in the actual plant material, it tends to be less bioavailable. Now, cooking can help increase the bioavailability because it breaks some of those bonds and whatnot, but it still seems to be lower. And it's really interesting. There was a recent study where they did a corn, wheat, and pea blend of protein versus whey. And basically the outcome was 30 grams of each stimulated protein synthesis to a similar degree. But the plasma amino acids in the plant-based protein still did not get as high as with whey. Now, it may be that that's just, it doesn't matter because once you get to a certain level, you get all the benefits. So, but I still found it interesting nonetheless that they didn't quite get as high. The other thing to consider with the vegan sources of protein is the leucine content. So one of the studies we did was we looked at wheat, soy, egg, and whey. Isonitrogenous, meaning we equated protein between the groups. Isocaloric, we equated calories. And we looked at muscle protein synthesis. And I think the meals were 15% of total energy from protein. So like your food guide pyramid level of protein. And we saw that in the wheat and soy group, they did not increase muscle protein synthesis, but the egg and whey group increased muscle protein synthesis. Now, what's really interesting is we went back and we took wheat and added free leucine to it to match the leucine content of whey, and the protein synthetic response was identical. So, again, I don't like to simplify things too much, but leucine appears to really be driving this ship. And I'll never forget, Layman called me in his office one day, and he would always do these like thought experiments of, he liked to think about why something occurs the way it does.
Dangerous territory.
Yeah, so he would say, one day, I'll never forget, he's like, Lane, why do you think the body evolved to just sense leucine for muscle protein synthesis? And of course, I'm like, I don't know, man, I just work here. Like, I'm just trying to get my PhD. And he said, well, think about it. You would want something that really wasn't extensively metabolized by the gut and liver, because you would want it to show up in the blood in values that reflect what you just ate. Makes sense. And you would want it to have passive diffusion across the muscle cell, because you want it to be concentration dependent, which it is. So
get into the tissues and cells.
What a cat push-ups.
Right. So, not having active transport, but rather
what
passive
cat push-ups,
transport.
bum.
So yeah, I thought that was really interesting.
Cheers
the way
for joining the
he broke that
stream.
down. So,
hope you're having a good day.
few different options.
Let me know
for
if
the
you do any
vegan folks
training or
out
anything
there.
like that.
You can use an isolated source of protein, and again, like there's going to be good
Whether
options
you're a
coming,
professional
because
or
this
not, I always
plant-based
like
whey
giving
is going
advice.
to be a great option for folks. You can add free leucine to it, to whatever your source of protein is.
Just buy supplemented leucine
Just buy
powder.
leucine. Now, it tastes horrible.
Yeah, I think I've heard that. Maybe I've even tried it.
It's completely non-polar, does not dissolve in anything,
Can
and
it
it
be put
is
into capsules?
gross. It can be put into capsules, yeah. So you could take a capsule, like for example, if you're eating your normal meal, you could just take a capsule of like 1 gram of leucine. It's probably going to bump you up enough that you're going to be good to go. And then there's options like
Anyway,
blends,
one more
especially
set.
with corn. Corn is actually very high in leucine.
I might try to
as a
just
percentage
push
of
out
its
some
protein.
pull-ups.
Now you got to remember, like, you
Bulgarian,
eat corn on a
Russian
cob and
twists,
you're getting
and
like 2 grams of total protein, so it's not
Sedentaria,
that much
one
leucine.
last set.
But if you isolate out the protein,
Got a
put it
bit
into
more
a
in me.
powder,
Now
well,
I've got to get to
now,
work.
when you're getting like 80-90% of the weight is now protein, corn is actually about 12% leucine in terms of the protein. So a great source of leucine. It is like almost frank deficient in some other amino acids, but you can blend it with a few other sources of protein. Like you could blend it with a soy, a pea, and you can create these complementary blends that would actually have quite a bit of leucine, but also some of the other essential amino acids. So there are options out there for plant-based folks. And I mean, we have seen people who are plant-based, build impressive amounts of muscle. There's quite a few bodybuilders that are plant-based.
A lot of the endurance athletes like it, and even though when we talk about muscle, we think about muscle building often, performance in endurance sports, and also just performance for the typical person who's doing some cardiovascular training, hopefully some resistance training also, and just living life. I mean, many more people now, it seems, are vegan or at least avoiding meat, in particular red meat. I'm not one of those people.
Yeah.
I limit the amount, and I certainly focus on the quality of what I eat, but I do eat red meat, which brings me to a question about, just generally in terms of food choice. Can we come up with a relatively short summary of the following? Tell me if this is correct or not. That most of us should be focused on, for sake of health span and lifespan, should be focused on ingesting minimally non-processed and minimally processed foods. Maybe even cooking our own food. I realize that's heresy now, but ideally we would do some of that, and really trying to avoid foods that are highly processed and have lots of sugar. And I'm using this as a segue to get into a question that I really want your answer to. I've been dying to ask you this, which is if sugar intake is not actually going up as much as people think it is, why are people getting so much fatter? So what do you think about just a general statement that we should try and eat foods that are low to no, minimally to not processed for about 80% of our foods? Is that a reasonable number?
It's hard to actually get completely unprocessed food because almost everything goes through some form of processing.
Right. So I'm thinking like anything that wouldn't survive long without refrigeration. Yeah, on a shelf, like an apple or a banana or something. Oatmeal, like ground oats, to me, as long as there isn't a bunch of other stuff in there, would be minimally processed. A steak is not really processed, although it's cut off the animal, etc. So there's a few steps in there, but that's what I mean.
And I think everybody kind of gets the gist. I'm probably a little bit pedantic when it comes to this stuff.
No, this is good.
That's the
one
workout
of the things I appreciate about you is
6
something that I get
sets
teased
of
by people close to me, which
weighted
is
pull-ups,
the caveats and the insistence on
squats,
precision is really
Russian
important
twists,
because especially with
and
online communications
That's
these
probably
days,
the
it's
first time
like
I've done a
runaway
dedicated
train.
anterior
People
exercise.
It's too easy to misinterpret what you're saying.
Very easy to misinterpret, and the misinterpretations are often used to leverage whole new ideas about what is and isn't true, mostly about what is true. So I really appreciate the nuance.
it does a bit of sit out, but nothing
podcast
dedicated.
really allows us to do is catch every curve.
Yeah.
You know.
So
It makes sense
I would
though.
100%
My
agree
cars
with
are
what
so
you
tight.
said,
I probably don't
that
have any
if
tibials
you were
and
gonna
series
make
to sort of
a
counteract
broad
that.
stroke,
Should I
that
stop going in
trying
there?
to focus on minimally processed foods is very important. The one caveat I would say is I think it's important to understand why, because otherwise people can make this weird association that, like, if I eat any minimally or any processed food, it's going to kill me, or like every time I eat it, it's like I'm smoking a cigarette and my health, my longevity is declining. Based on the studies we have, it's mostly about the energy. That processed food just gets people to spontaneously eat more. And Kevin Hull showed this in his study that was he designed some of the most elegant studies in nutrition.
He's great.
And they basically took people from a minimally processed food diet and then gave them access to ultra processed foods, very few instructions, just eat till you feel satisfied, and they spontaneously increased their calorie intake by 500 calories a day. I mean, that's massive. So and we haven't quite figured it out. People say, well, it's sugar. It doesn't appear to be sugar in terms of just in isolation. Well, it's fats. It doesn't appear to be fats in isolation. Well, it's the combination of sugar and fat. Partly, well, it's the combination of sugar, fat, and salt. Partly, but there's some kind of like overall magic to the texture and the mouthfeel and just the overall palatability of stuff, which is always why I say there's like right and wrong ways to do these different diets. Like, for example, there's a right way to do plant-based, and then there's, like what's in some of these documentaries where they're eating like plant-based mac and cheese. And again, I love a good mac and cheese, but like that should not be pitched as a healthy diet just because it's plant-based, right? Because you're eating a highly processed food that's very palatable and easy to overeat. Same thing for keto. You've now got like keto ice creams, and you've got keto cookies and all these sorts of things. And I'm like, and if you look at them, they actually have more calories than the normal stuff. And I'm like, this is completely missing the point here. Like, you're actually just taking yourself, like, the whole point of those diets is the reason you tend to lose weight is originally, like, good luck, 10 years ago doing a keto diet, eating processed food, right? Like, you just couldn't do it, really. Now you can. But the problem is it's not going to work because you're going to be still consuming too many calories, because even though it's keto, what are they doing? Well, they're trying to make it more palatable. They're trying to make it better mouthfeel, which I guess if you're being keto for the sake of being keto, great. But if you have hopes of body composition modification, it's going to really negatively impact. So yes, I think minimizing the amount of processed food you consume can be important. Now, that being said, it depends on the individual and their goals. If your goal is to, for example, build muscle or maintain a high body weight for a sport, for example, like an NFL offensive lineman or something of that nature, or if you're, I worked with an NBA team, and they were kind of, I can't disclose anything, but they were looking at drafting a certain player.
I need a heavier kettlebell.
you know,
28 kilos.
like for them, processed foods may actually be a tool.
Or teenagers.
Right.
You know, we all want young people to eat more healthfully, I think, develop great habits, but some of them, their caloric needs are so high. That if they were eating what I eat, they're going to dissolve into, they're just waste away.
So I describe this, again, with a financial example. It's like a budget, right? So if I make $1 million a year, for example, is it okay for me to buy like a $100,000 sports car? Let's assume that loans don't exist, right? Is it okay for me to buy a $100,000 sports car if I still am able to pay my mortgage and pay my utilities and like take care of my responsibilities, the things I should do? Is it okay if I do that, if it like makes me feel good and it's fun?
By me.
Yeah, it's fine, right? Like it fits in your budget. If I make, 50 grand a year, should I be going out and, buying a sports car? Probably not, because I'm not going to be able to pay my mortgage and all these other responsibilities. So your protein, your fiber, your micronutrients, these are your responsibilities. But those become much easier to hit when you have higher calories, right? So if you're eating 4,000 calories a day for whatever goal you have, you're probably going to have some left over, and like good luck eating 4,000 calories from minimally processed foods. You, quite frankly, you'll be miserable because you're going to have such gut fill that you're going to feel like you can't even move. And so, again, now it becomes, okay, well, is there something inherent to that food processing? Is there something, that we can pick out that we know, okay, well, this is going to be a negative effect on health, even like body composition stuff aside? And I would say there's not really great evidence of that so far. And a great example of that is sugar. I mean, I actually just wrote a really long article on my website about why I think sugar was not the root cause of the obesity epidemic. And you kind of mentioned like sugar intake in the last 20 years has actually gone down a little bit.
Alcohol intake, well, if you look on the whole, it might have gone up a little bit, but it, certainly in the male sector, it's gone way down. Drinking used to be, there was a 5 o'clock, people drinking all day. People are smoking a lot less. I think it's a real puzzle. I'd love to know what your hypotheses
could actually
are.
be in opposition because nicotine is actually an appetite suppressant.
Appetite suppressant also increases focus. The problem is it often arrives in a delivery device that can kill you. But nicotine itself is a powerful agent. It also can offset age-related cognitive decline. Not entirely, but it makes the brain work better.
I've got a buddy
do a little bit more if I
who
didn't have
doesn't
work,
like
but-
caffeine, and he just takes those nicotine pouches and like basically has one in almost all day because he has a very stressful job and is a high performer,
Yeah, you have to be careful how you deliver it, but there's a Nobel Prize winning neuroscientist that will chew 5 or 6 pieces of Nicorette an hour, which I do not recommend. But when he quit smoking, he just simply couldn't function as well, and he was the one who pointed me to the literature on offsetting age-related cognitive decline, even neuron maintenance, and it's pretty interesting.
Well, it's a pretty impressive nootropic, to be honest. So, the first thing to realize is when we're talking about consumption data, this is based on actual production, basically. They're assuming that, okay, we're producing this amount of these foods, so we can assume the consumption is going to follow that. So it's not a direct measurement, but it has been validated in a few different studies. We know that oil consumption has gone up. Like that's one of the big ones and this kind of forms the crux of like the seed oils or like the root of
it's definitely a question that I'm going to ping you on.
They're going to come into your house and kick your dog and punch your mom and all kinds of stuff, and I'm happy to address those. But so calories have still gone up. There's some people who claim that they've kind of plateaued. I think the data seems to suggest that calorie intake is still increasing. And the other thing to keep in mind is, even if it's plateaued, it's still at a high enough level that obesity is probably going to continue to increase up to a point where it'll probably plateau if calories are plateaued.
What about energy output? Leaving aside meat, because that sounds highly individual. I mean, people we know are focusing on exercise. But there are a lot of folks out there that don't exercise.
And energy output has gone down over the years. I mean, and it's very obvious when you look at how people work now compared to even 30, 40 years ago. It's much different.
Less walking. Also, I learned recently that kids in high school don't.
All right, cool. Done for the day. Like I said, everything with the weighted backpack on. 15 kilos to start, went down to 10 kilos. pull-ups, Bulgarian squats. Oh, he's gone. Yeah, he wants to get out of here. Russian twists and tib anterior. First time I'm ever doing that dedicated to that muscle. Anyway, for today, I'll do my usual forearm manual therapist training on the weekends. Whether or not I stream it or not, I'll see. Depends how I'm feeling, depends what I'm watching. Well, that just sounded wrong, but anyway. Till next time. Get ready before I lose time to get ready for work. Bye, and have a good weekend.